looking for fun things to do in our small hometown. Sometimes, this involved going into places we weren't necessarily allowed to go into. Usually this was just to cool old quarries that became hidden lakes, or old bridges that are supposedly haunted. One place that my friend Julia always wanted to go was an old cement plant tucked away on a random street in the middle of town. The plan was that nearly 20 of us would go, but in the end only 3 of us showed up. Me, Julia, and my other friend Anthony. Now I had been to some pretty creepy places, but this place just didn't feel right. Not only was the building itself decrepit and very unsafe, the plant was in a bad part of town. The house next door had been busted as a meth house. Rumor had it that it was a common campsite for the homeless. It was also like 11 at night, and beyond that, I was just getting goosebumps being near the place. Julia had been there before, so she was determined to lead the way. The place was cool. It had rooftops to climb on, broken windows, rooms that looked like people had just left and never came back, and a ton of graffiti. Periodically we would hear little noises, almost like debris falling from the roof. We chalked it up to the building being old and paranoia. They started to become more frequent, and we could have sworn it was pebbles being thrown. But we told ourselves we were just scaring ourselves. Julia told us there was a place around this corner to climb up onto the roof, and started climbing up these giant concrete cubes. She was in front, then me, then Anthony. As we got onto the roof, my heart leaps, and I went cold. There was a guy laying down on the roof right in front of us. Being very freaked out, I motioned to Anthony to start going back down as I took a step back. The guy said to us, "What are you doing here?" I told him we were just hanging out, and being a stupid teenager, asked him what he was doing. He began to get up in what seemed to me to be a very aggressive manner. So me and my friends bolted down the blocks and back out to our car down the road. We didn't look back. We all agreed that was probably one of the most terrifying moments of our life. We didn't know if he was a drug addict, a homeless guy, or what. He could have had a knife or something. We realized he was probably throwing rocks at us as we were walking in, and was watching us the whole time. Finally, we agreed to never go back. That was until about 5 minutes later when Julia gets a call from her other friend Abby. We had just gotten free from her family and was ready to check the place out. Immediately, Anthony and I were like, no way. We are going home. Or we're getting ice cream or something. Anything but going back in there. But Abby really wanted to check it out, and Julia would not relent. So we decided to go back against my better judgment. We just promised not to go near where the guy was. Anthony and I were very hesitant as we walked in. We tried to keep the girls from going too far, but they just kept plugging along. Eventually, we started to get near where the guy was, and we told them we were too far. But they didn't stop. They wanted to keep going. They pushed ahead of us and kept walking. Anthony and I didn't want to go any further, but there was nothing we could do. We reached a part that was right in the open, right where the guy would be able to see us if he was still there. But no doubt he had heard us already. Anthony and I pleaded with the girls, telling them it was time to go. All of a sudden we heard a large crash, like something being thrown off the roof, accompanied by the sound of someone running towards us. Anthony and I took off back running towards the exit. Silhouetted by the streetlight on the road, we saw a person standing right in the middle of where we had just come from. He was holding a shovel. Nearly staining my pants with all sorts of feces, Anthony and I stopped in our tracks. I thought I was going to die. We remembered there was a smaller exit that led right to the road, through some trees, and we ran like hell through it. About halfway to the road, we stopped and realized something. Girls went with us. The guy with the shovel started coming down the path we were on. He was shouting things like, "Get back here, I just want to talk to you." His words were slurred and he was moving weird, like he was strung out on something. Nancy and I thought, no chance in hell that's happening, and yelled back at him, asking him where our friends were. He started getting near us, so we ran back until we were on the road. I wanted to make sure my friends were all right, but I was scared. They couldn't have gone out the main exit, and they weren't behind us. There was nowhere they could have gone. They were both runners. I thought maybe they juked the guy and got out. So I pulled out my phone and dialed Julia. She didn't answer. The shovel guy did. I told him that if anything had happened to our friends, he would be going to jail for a long time. He hung up on me. I thought best case scenario she dropped her phone. I didn't want to imagine the worst case scenario. Anthony really did not want to call the cops because he was concerned about getting caught trespassing because of his family and future plans. I told him that our friends were hurt. Getting in trouble was our smallest concern. I wanted to go back around to the other entrance to see if they made it out. Anthony wanted to just leave and hope they made it out okay. I resolved that if Abby didn't answer her phone, I was calling 911. I called her phone and started shaking as it slowly went to her voicemail. Biting the bullet, I started pressing the numbers for 911. When I got a call back from her, I answered the phone, drilling them with questions, but all I got back was laughing. Her laughing. She told me it was all a prank. I was angry and relieved at the same time. But I don't think I laughed until I saw them again. The two guys were her brothers. I still can't believe I didn't recognize them. They planned the whole thing out and were trying to get my entire friend group. Even though it ended up being a prank, it was the most heart-racing experience of my life. I learned how I acted under pressure, and it ended up being kind of fun, like I was in a real horror movie. We ended up doing it again, bigger, and for all of our friends. It ended up being a bit traumatic, but that's a story for another day. A little background. This story involves my friend and I. My friend's name is Jessica, and mine is Hannah. In a very sketchy city about 20 minutes from the town where we live. This city is notorious for shootings, rapes, gang activity, etc. but it is the closest city with a Dunkin' Donuts. That is how my friend and I ended up in Sketchville, USA at 11:30 at night. Now I'm fairly tall for a girl, 5'8", and about 140 pounds, and my friend is about 5'5" and 120 pounds, so we're not super tiny girls. But there's not a whole lot of muscle behind us either. This was about 3 years ago. We were 17 at the time. Also, somehow we managed to have 2 creepy things happen to us in one night. So this is a 2-part story. Alright. Q leaving Dunkin' Donuts at about midnight. We had parked a little far away from the entrance to DD. I can't remember why, maybe it was busy. And as we were walking back to my friend's car, we noticed she left her lights on. Cue, oh shit, moment, because she drove an 80s Honda Prelude at the time. We knew the car was dead before we even got to it. So we started calling everyone we can think of. Her boyfriend, our parents, any friends who we knew who had cables. Even my ex-boyfriend, because we knew he would come and help if he could. People either didn't answer because they were asleep, or they were at work, or some friends just didn't have the gas to drive 25 minutes to us and back to the town we live in. So plan B. Wait for the least sketchy looking person in the parking lot and ask if they have cables. Easier said than done. I should mention we both have severe social anxiety, so talking to rando people in general was hard for us, especially at midnight in a seedy town where we are both stranded. We turned the hazards on and waited to see if anyone would approach us to help. No such luck, and it is now nearing 1 a.m. We finally decide to go ask a guy who looks maybe only level 3 creep, but was approaching level 5 creep for sitting in a parking lot alone at 1 a.m. He drove a relatively nice car though, so we made our move. As we were walking up to his window, he rolled it down and smiled at us. A little creepy, but we need his help. What can I do for you ladies? Our car is dead and we were wondering if you had cables and could jump it. I have something better than cables. He rolls up his window, and at this point, alarm bells are blaring. But we're too far in already. He pops his trunk and gets out of the car. He was about 6 feet tall and probably 220 pounds, so he definitely had some weight on us. He pulls this thing out of the back of his car. I'm not very car savvy and at the time had no idea what it was, but later learned it was a trickle charger. It is essentially a small battery that you hook to your car battery and it charges it. So we walk back to our car and he hooks this thing up to the car. You gotta leave it on for a while. Wanna go get out of the cold and go sit in my car while it charges? No thank you, creepy guy. Of course, we politely declined and said we were fine because we had jackets. He then starts to ramble about how he is supposed to be meeting his bitch ex-wife to exchange their kid, but she's late, like always, stupid cow. And we're just standing there nodding and ahhing. Finally, he says the battery should hold for a while and detaches the trickle charger. You girls want to exchange phone numbers? Just in case you die on your way home. No, I think we're okay. We don't live far. Ah, time to get away. We thank him. And he stands there and watches us the whole time we get in the car. Lock the doors. Double check the doors are locked and drive away. He waves at us smiling as we exit the parking lot We immediately start talking about how creepy that guy was, and how we're glad we're together because that might have gone a lot differently if it had just been one of us. That is the end of Creepy Encounter 1 for the night. So, smiling trickle charger guy, let's not meet again. At this point, we should have just gone home. It is about 1:45 in the AM, and we're still in the middle of Sketchville. But we're all amped up from adrenaline from the first encounter. We also are both about to pee our pants, and we are also super thirsty and need gas. So we stop at a gas station a few blocks away from the mall. I forgot to mention, the DD was in the parking lot of a big mall in this city. And the further away from the mall you get, the sketchier the city gets. Again, another reason we should have headed back to our town. Anyway, we pull into this gas station and decide to park and go in and pee and get drinks before we get gas. The only open parking spot is like behind the gas station in a super shadowed, almost like alley with one dim light. Jessica puts the car in park, and before I even unbuckle my seatbelt, I look over, and there is a car next to us. In the car, there is a shadowed, hooded figure. It just appears from behind the A-frame of the car, and just stares at us. The windows in the car are frosted, like the car's been sitting there, not running for a while. I got that feeling, the one you get when you legitimately feel like your life is in danger. Just an overwhelming sense of dread. Like the kind that immediately brings tears to your eye because you're so terrified. Jessica had already unlocked the doors and I am frozen, staring at this thing, with my mouth hanging up and tears in my eyes. I throw my hand behind me and hit Jessica and she looks over. I have never seen that girl move so fast. She locks the door, shoves the key into the ignition, and throws the car into reverse, seemingly all at the same time, and rips out of the parking lot like a bat out of hell. We drive in silence for a few minutes, immediately going on the freeway and heading back to our town. She looks at me, and I see tears in her eyes too, and she finally talks and says, "What the fuck was that?" And I don't answer for a few minutes because I don't have an answer. I have no fucking clue. Did you see a face? She shakes her head no, and we're silent again for a few minutes. Hannah, did you feel like we were gonna die if we stayed there even a second longer? Like just a feeling that something horrible was gonna happen if we didn't get out of there as fast as possible. I told her I had felt the exact same way, and we didn't talk much for the rest of the ride home. We went back to my house and peed and got something to drink there, and got gas in the morning. We talked about it the next day to see if we felt any different the next day, in the daylight, and we both agreed we did not. Something horrible was in that car, whether it's human or not. I can't tell. I've never felt such a sense of horror and fear as I did in that moment, before or after that, ever in my life. The horrifying hooded figure in the car. Let's not meet. Ever. So to give you some background, I'm from a very small town in northwest Florida. I've moved around the country a few times, but I seem to be drawn to other smallish towns, either by nature or random happenstance. Consequently, this story is set in Bellingham, Washington. where I lived for the past few years. During the second summer I lived there, my significant other of about 8 years and I moved into the downtown area. The area I'm from in Florida is neither bike nor pedestrian friendly, while Bellingham is exceedingly so in both cases. So I was really enjoying being able to walk downtown basically anytime I wanted, as it was within about 10 minutes of our house. I lived right off a pretty main street, fairly well lit and well traveled, so I never really felt too paranoid when walking alone at night, even though I am a pretty small girl, 5'1", 125 pound tops, but also capable of some pretty intense rage, and I always carried a knife. It was also the middle of summer, around 10:30 p.m. So there tended to be steady clumps of other people my age walking around that time of night, heading to bars and restaurants. On this particular night, my significant other and I had started drinking a bit early at the house, and we both had forgotten to make dinner until we realized we were starving. But neither of us felt like cooking anything. I also really wanted a potato burrito, basically what it sounds like. Luckily, Bellingham has a few good restaurants that happen to be open late and also serve said burrito. So I called in a pickup order and waited about 20 minutes, then started walking into town. I got about a quarter mile from my house on the main drag when I saw a silver Toyota 4Runner parked in the laundromat parking lot, about 50 yards ahead of me. I could hear the engine running even though the lights were off, which was mildly disconcerting. But I figured it was just someone checking Google Maps before fucking around with all the one-way streets downtown, or simply calling a friend on their way over, whatever. I walk past the truck and get to the next crosswalk, like 10 feet, before I hear the truck pull out behind me. The light turns green and they speed off, and I keep walking, only to see the truck pull into the next shopping center type thing on my side of the road and park in front of a very closed, very dark shop. They turn their lights off again, car still running. Immediately I start to get suspicious because, well, what? But I'm over halfway to town, and the further I go, the more people there are bound to be, and therefore safer. So I keep walking, albeit at a more brisk pace. As I approach the vehicle on my right, even though it's dark, I can see there's only one guy in there, a pretty nondescript Indian-looking dude. He turns and yells out the window, "Hey, you're so beautiful. Would you like to go out to dinner with me?" At this point I'm like, okay, kind of creepy. But this guy probably just sucks at flirting and is already drunk or something. So I just say, sorry, no thanks, as polite as I can muster. I'm not good at confrontation and just want a goddamn burrito, so I keep walking. He tries to ask me if I'm sure, and I'm like, yep, sorry, and he drives off again. At this point I've opened up my phone and have 911 ready to call just in case, because ain't nobody got time for that. I walk probably another couple of 100 yards, almost starting to get comfortable again, when all of a sudden this motherfucker pulls up in my left this time, stopping in a parallel parking spot. I'm on the sidewalk in front of a bank at this point, which I assume has security cameras, so my instinct tells me to slow down if anything happens, It might get caught on tape at least. Dude rolls down his window and asks, again, if I will go have some drinks or dinner with him. I'm like, no thanks, I'm just going to pick up a burrito for my boyfriend and I. He throws in a couple more, oh, come on, are you sure? You're so beautiful's in there. I get fed up and I'm like, no, have a good night, dude, bye. He gets all huffy, but finally peels out of the spot and down the road. And I manage to eventually make it to the house with my delicious burritos without seeing him again. But not without a significant level of paranoia encompassing my walk back. A few days later, I had almost forgotten about this incident. However, I happened to take the bus to work every day, Friday through Saturday. One of these days, around 9:30 a.m., I sat on the bench, waiting, as one does. I'm there for all of 2 to 3 minutes when I see the same silver 4Runner from a few nights before start to pass by on the opposite side of the road. First I was like, shit, you're being paranoid. Of course that's not the same guy creeping on you at 9:30 a.m. in the damn morning. Except, directly across from the bus stop, there's a little parking area in front of a mechanic shop. This guy sees me, immediately pulls into this space and parks. He then proceeds to roll down his window so I can see that, yes, it is absolutely the same fucking creepy guy. Rolls down his window, lights a cigarette, and just stares at me for what seemed like a good minute or so. It was way too early for me to deal with this bullshit, so I'm like, oh hell no. And start making a big deal out of angrily stomping around to look at the front of his car, writing down his license plate in my phone, and dialing 911. As soon as he sees me doing this, he suddenly speeds off, and I'm just left wondering what the hell is going on. The bus pulls up like 30 seconds later, and I'm on my way to work. I didn't bother calling 911. I probably should have, but I didn't. But I did save his plate number in my phone and posted it on Facebook. I never saw him again, but I was definitely much more careful about walking around town at night by myself. So, creepy dude following me around in the silver 4Runner, let's not meet. And I don't know what the deal was that summer, but I also had another unrelated incident in that same week, where a separate random dude tried to give me a ride in his Jeep, going so far as to pull over in a parking lot in front of me and reiterate his offer. This was in broad daylight, so not quite as nerve-wracking. But other creepy dude in the Jeep, let's also not fucking meet.